Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge to help you become truly well-informed. Today we're doing something a little different, but I think incredibly insightful. We're diving deep into the very fabric of how we understand and communicate with each other, language itself. Our mission today is to embark on a linguistic deep dive, sifting through the layers of meaning in a classic, yet maybe often underestimated source. Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms, created in cooperation with the editors of Merriam-Webster. Now, you might think a dictionary is just, for looking up words, a simple tool, but we're going to show you how it's actually a treasure trove for understanding the true power of precise communication. It's about unlocking the subtle magic within everyday words.
Indeed. And this isn't just about vocabulary expansion, though you'll certainly gain some new terms. More profoundly, it's about discerning the subtle but, well, significant differences between words that seem, maybe at first glance, to be interchangeable. Understanding these nuances empowers us to communicate with far greater clarity, to avoid those, frustrating misunderstandings that can plague so many conversations.
Right.
And to truly appreciate the richness and expressive power of the English language. It's about moving beyond simply knowing what a word means, to grasping why it matters and precisely when to use it for maximum impact.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to explore how seemingly interchangeable words actually carry distinct shades of meaning. And that reveals fascinating insights into not just expression, but thought itself. Get ready for some serious aha moments about the incredible precision hidden within the words we use every single day. Let's start with a really foundational concept, how we talk about putting things to good use, or conversely, what happens when things lack value. It's a spectrum that really defines efficiency and impact.
Exactly. We often casually say use for everything, don't we?
Yeah, I use this, I use that.
Right.
I use the stapler, I use my time wisely. But the dictionary offers three powerful alternatives, each with its own subtle yet distinct implication. Employ, utilize, and apply. Each choice kind of reveals a different layer of intention and resourcefulness. Let's begin with employ. The dictionary's core information states, employ suggests the using of a person or thing that is available but idle, inactive, or disengaged by putting him, her, or it to some work or profitable activity.
Okay. Idle, inactive, or disengaged. That's key.
That's the key. What's fascinating here is that this isn't just about simple usage. It's about actively activating something that was lying dormant, taking a resource that was disengaged and bringing it into productive, often profitable use. Think about, say, that dusty treadmill in the corner. You're not just using it when you step on, you're employing it, activating its potential.
It implies efficiency and maximizing potential from what's already on hand, often with a sense of purpose and activation. For instance, consider a company that have a valuable patent just sitting on a shelf.
Yeah.
They aren't just using it if they decide to develop a product from it. They're employing a dormant asset.
Employing it.
Or
Yeah.
maybe a talented but currently unassigned
Yeah.
team member.
Yeah.
You employ their skills by giving them a new project.
Right.
It's about engagement and giving something a specific, often strategic purpose it wasn't previously fulfilling.
I can really feel that distinction. So it's about bringing something from a state of inaction into effective operation. You're not just using a piece of software. Maybe you're employing a sophisticated AI algorithm to optimize a process that speaks to a higher level of conscious activation, strategic intent. It's about leverage.
Precisely. Next up, we have utilize.
Okay.
The dictionary notes. Utilize may suggest the discovery of a new, profitable, or practical use for something that might be overlooked or wasted, like how meat processors utilize every part of the animal.
Overlooked or wasted. That's different.
Very different. This word carries a strong sense of ingenuity and resourcefulness. It's about finding value where others might not see it, preventing waste, or maybe innovating with existing components. It goes beyond mere function to finding optimal or even unexpected functions. Think of a company that finds a way to utilize waste products from one manufacturing process as raw material for an entirely new product line.
Right. Turning trash into treasure, basically.
Exactly. That's not just using the waste. It's a creative, value-added transformation. Or consider how a clever home organizer utilizes the back of a door for storage, transforming an overlooked surface into a functional space. This speaks to a deeper level of strategic thinking and resource optimization, finding that hidden potential.
That's a great distinction. So if Employ is about activating something currently idle. Utilize is about finding new or better uses for something, perhaps even something that was previously considered waste or had an obvious but maybe limited purpose. It's about being truly clever and innovative with resources.
You've nailed it. You've absolutely got it. And finally, apply.
Okay, apply.
The dictionary states, apply stresses the bringing of one thing into contact or relation with something else in such a way that it proves useful or acquires practical value, like applying specific rules to a situation.
Contact or relation,
Yeah.
practical value.
Yes. This word highlights the direct, practical implementation of a principle, a rule, or maybe a concept to a specific situation to achieve desired outcome. It's about putting theory into practice or bringing a tool to bear directly on a problem. When you apply a bandage to a wound, you are bringing it into direct contact for its intended useful purpose.
Makes sense.
When you apply for a job, you're bringing your qualifications and experience into direct relation with the requirements of that specific role, hoping they acquire practical value for the employer. It's about direct relevance and practical execution, bridging that gap between an idea or an object and a concrete result.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the core difference is employa focuses on activating an idle resource, utilize on finding novel or optimal uses for something, maybe overlooked uses, and apply on bringing something into direct practical contact for a specific outcome. These really aren't just synonyms. They're different stages or types of intentional interaction.
Exactly. While all three relate to use, they describe very different approaches and outcomes, each with a distinct sense of purpose and process. And speaking of outcomes, what about when our efforts, or even the things themselves, seem to lack any value at all?
Right.
Let's turn to the other end of the spectrum and explore the fascinatingly varied ways the English language describes worthlessness and futility.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. How many ways can we say something is useless or pointless? Apparently, far more than you might think. The dictionary gives us vain, nugatory, otiose, idle, empty, and hollow. These words allow for incredible precision when articulating exactly why something falls short.
Let's start with vain. The core information is, vain implies either absolute or relative absence of value or worth. Like, it is vain to think that we can alter destiny.
A strong example.
It suggests a complete lack of purpose or effectiveness, often associated with a sense of futility or hopelessness. It's a pursuit that will yield absolutely nothing no matter how much effort is exerted. If you repeatedly try to reason with someone who is, determined not to listen, your attempts might feel vain.
Yeah, been there.
They're devoid of any productive outcome. The effort itself is rendered meaningless by the inevitability of failure. It speaks to a fundamental pointlessness in the action or the hope.
That evokes a strong sense of futility. It's not just useless, but almost tragically so. So if something is vain, it implies a complete absence of value right from the outset, or at least from the moment you realize the effort is pointless.
What about nugatory? That's not a word you hear every day.
No, it's less common, but very useful. Nugatory suggests triviality or insignificance. The example given is a monarch with nugatory powers.
Ah, okay, so powerless, essentially. Something nugatory isn't just worthless in the sense of being ineffective. It's so small or unimportant as to be inconsequential, almost beneath notice. Its impact is negligible. Imagine a proposed amendment to a law that only corrects a minor typo, having no bearing on its meaning or enforcement. That would be a nugatory change.
Got it. Trivial.
Or a side comment in a long meeting that carries no weight or influence on the decision-making process. It's about something being so trivial that it doesn't even register as having a meaningful impact.
That's a powerful word for something that just doesn't matter in the grand scheme. Really emphasizes how minor something is. And then there's otiose. This one suggests that something serves no purpose and is either an encumbrance or a superfluity. I like the example. Not a single scene in the film is otiose.
Indeed. An odious element doesn't just lack value, it actively gets in the way or is entirely unnecessary.
It's a burden.
It's an extra burden, a weight without function. In writing, an odious paragraph adds nothing to the plot or character development and just bogs down the reader, making the work less effective. In a well-designed machine, every part has a function. An odious part would be an unnecessary component, adding complexity or cost without benefit.
Right.
It speaks to a redundancy that is actually detrimental. It's not just pointless, it's a hindrance.
So otiose is about excess that hinders, whereas nugatory is about insignificance. Distinct but related. Okay, next, idle.
Idle suggests a lack of capacity for worthwhile use or effect, like It is idle to speculate on what might have been. This speaks to unproductivity or unprofitability, often because the thing itself is simply not being put to use or inherently cannot achieve anything meaningful. It implies inactivity leading to worthlessness. Think of an idle factory that could be producing goods but is standing dormant,
Yeah.
or idle chatter conversation that produces no meaningful outcome, just fills time. It's about potential value being unrealized due to inaction or inherent limitation.
So idle is about things that are just sitting there, not doing anything useful, or even concepts that are unproductive. And then we have the pair, empty and hollow. The dictionary states these suggest a deceiving lack of real substance, soundness, genuineness, or value. Examples: an empty attempt at reconciliation, a hollow victory that benefited no one.
These words carry a really strong sense of deception. Something empty or hollow appears to have substance or value on the surface, but upon closer inspection, it's revealed to be lacking depth or genuine benefit.
Like a facade.
Exactly. An empty promise sounds good, but has no intention or means of fulfillment. A hollow victory might technically be a win, but it comes at such a great cost or yields such negligible gain that it feels meaningless and ultimately unsatisfying. The surface suggests substance, but the core is vacant. This raises an important question, doesn't it? How often do we mistake appearance for genuine value?
That's a powerful distinction, because it implies a potential for active misdirection, or at least a significant disappointment when the true nature is revealed. So, what does this all mean for you, our listener? Well, when evaluating claims, promises, or achievements, these words give you the incredibly precise tools to articulate exactly why something falls short. Whether it's merely vain in its futility, subtly nugatory in its insignificance, actively otiose as a hindrance, passively idle in its unproductivity, or deceptively empty or hollow in its lack of true substance. This precision allows for a much sharper critique and understanding of the world around us.
Moving on from worth and futility, let's explore words that describe familiarity, routine, and tradition. These terms might seem interchangeable at a glance,
Yeah, they seem pretty similar.
but they each paint a slightly different picture of what's considered normal or expected, distinguishing between personal patterns, community customs, and simple familiarity. First up, usual. The dictionary states, usual stresses the absence of strangeness or unexpectedness and is applicable to whatever is normal. Like my usual order for lunch, its antonym is unusual.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Very. This is the default, the expected, the baseline. It implies predictability and a lack of deviation from the norm, simply what you anticipate in a given situation. If you always take the same route to work, that's your usual route. There's nothing special or particularly ingrained about it, just what's common for you. It's the most straightforward term for routine.
So usual is truly the common, everyday expectation. No surprises there, just the standard. But then there's customary. This one applies to what accords with the practices, conventions, or usages of an individual or community, like a customary waiting period before remarrying. This feels like it goes beyond just personal habit, right?
Absolutely. Customary goes beyond mere personal habit to incorporate established practices, traditions, or social norms. It implies a degree of formalization or widespread acceptance within a group or society. It's about adherence to an expected way of doing things that are shared, not just individual. For example, it might be customary to bring a small gift when visiting someone's home for the first time in certain cultures.
Right.
This isn't just your personal usual behavior. It's a social expectation, a norm agreed upon by a community. It speaks to a collective practice.
Got it. So customary implies a group adherence, a tradition, or a convention. What about habitual? This word suggests a practice settled or established by much repetition, like an habitual exercise regime that served her well. This feels more personal and ingrained.
Precisely. Habitual focuses on the personal, ingrained nature of an action that has become almost automatic due to frequent repetition. It speaks to a deeply settled pattern of behavior for an individual, something that has become second nature through sheer consistency, almost like a reflex.
It's like muscle memory almost.
Kind of. Brushing your teeth every morning is a habitual action for many. It's something done consistently, often without conscious thought, because it's so deeply embedded in one's personal routine. It reflects a personal, repeated practice.
That makes perfect sense.
Oh.
It's the deep groove carved by repetition. And then we have wanted, which, as you said, is a word you don't hear every day, but it's quite beautiful. The dictionary says it stresses habituation, but usually applies to what is favored, sought, or purposefully cultivated. Example, his wanted pleasures had lost their appeal.
Yeah, this sounds like it adds a layer of personal preference.
It does. Wanted is a more archaic but truly beautiful word. It's not just a habit, but a favored or chosen habit.
Wow. Yeah.
Something actively pursued or cherished, often with a sense of comfort or personal connection. It adds a layer of affection or deliberate cultivation to the routine.
For a writer, their wanted morning ritual of coffee and quiet reading before tackling their work is a deeply cherished and purposefully cultivated habit. It's a habit chosen and enjoyed, reflecting a deep personal attachment. This word elevates mere habit to something almost beloved.
I can hear that nuance. It's not just a habit, but a preferred, even cultivated one. Finally, accustomed. This one is less emphatic than wanted or habitual in suggesting fixed habit or invariable custom. Example, accepted the compliment with her accustomed modesty.
Accustomed implies familiarity through exposure or experience, but perhaps without the deep, ingrained quality of habitual or the personal preference of wanted.
Okay.
It's simply what one is used to, what has become familiar through repeated exposure, rather than something deeply ingrained or actively chosen. If you move to a new city, you become accustomed to the local traffic patterns, you've adapted to them, but it might not be a habit you consciously formed or a wanted pleasure.
Right, you just get used to it.
Exactly. It speaks to a passive adjustment rather than an active internalizing or cherishing of a behavior. It's about adapting to external conditions.
So you, our listener, think about how you might describe your morning routine. Is it usual, just what happens every day without fuss? Is it customary for your household, a shared tradition or family convention? Is it habitual for you personally, an ingrained, almost automatic pattern of behavior? Is it your wanted quiet time, something you actively cherish and cultivate? Or is it just something you've become accustomed to over time, simply familiar through exposure? Each word shifts the emphasis, adding remarkable depth to your description of normalcy and personal patterns.
Now, in an age absolutely swimming in information, being able to discern truth from falsehood, strong arguments from weak ones, is really crucial. And our dictionary offers a fantastic toolkit for evaluating the strength of claims, helping us cut through the noise to find some clarity. We're looking at valid, sound, cogent, convincing, and telling. While all relate to the acceptance of an idea, they each highlight a different aspect of its persuasive power, focusing on accuracy, logic, presentation, effect, or revelation. Let's begin with valid. The dictionary states, valid implies being supported by objective truth or generally accepted authority. Like, absences will be excused for valid reasons. Antonyms include invalid, fallacious, sophistic.
Okay, objective truth, factual.
That's the core. This speaks to the inherent correctness or factual basis of something. A valid argument aligns with established facts, accepted evidence, or logical principles, making it difficult to dispute because its premises are objectively true.
Yep.
For example, a scientific experiment yields valid results if its methodology is sound and its findings are repeatable and consistent with established principles.
Right.
A contract is valid if it meets all the legal requirements. It's about fundamental truthfulness and proper grounding.
So valid is about objective truth or factual correctness. But sound suggests a different kind of strength, doesn't it? I mean, could an argument be valid in its facts, but maybe unsound in its reasoning?
That's an excellent question, and yes, absolutely. While valid is about the truth of the premises, sound implies a basis of flawless reasoning or solid grounds. Example, a sound proposal for combating terrorism. Antonyms,
Unsound, fallacious.
flawless reasoning.
Yes. When something is sound, its structure, logic, and foundation are robust and without discernible flaws. An argument can be valid, its premises are true, but unsound if its conclusion doesn't logically follow from those premises.
Okay.
Conversely, an argument can be logically flawless, technically sound, but based on false premises, making it invalid.
I see.
A sound proposal is one that is well thought out, practical, and likely to achieve its objectives because its internal logic holds up under scrutiny. It suggests reliability and robustness in its construction. That's a crucial distinction. Valid is about the facts being true. Sound is about the logic connecting those facts being correct. How does cogent fit in with these?
Cogent may stress either weight of sound argument and evidence or lucidity of presentation. Example, the prosecutor's cogent summation won over the jury.
So, strong argument and clear presentation.
Exactly. A cogent argument is not only well-reasoned and evidence-backed, meaning it's likely both sound and valid, but is also presented with such clarity and force that it is highly persuasive. It's effective because it's both strong in content and clear in delivery, Think of that lawyer's summation that not only presents all the facts and flawless logic, but does so with such persuasive power and clarity that it compels the jury to agree.
Right.
It's the combination of intellectual rigor and persuasive presentation that makes an argument cogent.
So cogent adds that layer of powerful, clear presentation to a valid and sound argument. What about convincing? This seems like it focuses more on the outcome, the effect.
Precisely. Convincing suggests a power to overcome doubt, opposition, or reluctance to accept. Example, a documentary that makes a convincing case for court reform.
Overcoming doubt.
Yes. This word focuses squarely on the effect an argument or presentation has on the audience. Something convincing has the practical power to persuade, to win over skeptical minds, or to overcome pre-existing reluctance. Even if the underlying logic isn't perfectly flawless or the evidence absolutely complete.
Oh, interesting.
A sales pitch might be convincing to a customer, even if it lacks the academic rigor of a cogent argument, simply because it addresses their specific needs and concerns effectively.
Yeah.
It achieves acceptance through its persuasive impact.
So convincing is about the audience's reception and the practical effect of persuasion. Now, telling seems a bit different. The dictionary says it stresses an immediate and crucial effect striking at the heart of a matter and may or may not imply soundness and validity. Example. A telling example of the bureaucratic mentality. This is really intriguing because it doesn't necessarily demand logic or truth.
It's fascinating, isn't it? A telling point isn't necessarily perfectly valid or sound, but it's incredibly revealing or impactful. It often exposes a truth or illustrates a key characteristic with immediate and undeniable force, cutting directly to the core of an issue. It hits home, often because it resonates deeply or reveals something fundamental. A single telling anecdote about someone's character might reveal more about them than a meticulously prepared psychological profile. It has an immediate striking effect, even if it's not part of a formal argument. It speaks volumes without needing extensive explanation.
This raises such an important question for you, our listener. When you hear news, an opinion, or maybe a new piece of information, how do you evaluate its strength? Is it valid because it's factually correct? Is it sound because its internal reasoning is flawless? Is it cogent because it's both strong and clearly presented? Is it convincing because it practically persuades you, regardless of absolute logical perfection? Or is it merely telling, revealing, and impactful, but perhaps not fully reasoned or entirely objective? Understanding these differences is absolutely key to becoming a discerning consumer of information in today's complex and frankly often noisy world.
Sometimes, though, the world isn't just flawed in its arguments. It's, well, flawed in its actions.
Yeah.
We need precise language to describe bad acts or morally reprehensible behavior.
Right.
The dictionary offers a deep dive into the spectrum of malevolence, from minor missteps to profound evil. Let's look at vicious, villainous, iniquitous, nefarious, infamous, corrupt, and degenerate. Each word adds a distinct layer to the concept of moral failing, describing different aspects of badness, from inherent character to specific actions and their societal impact. Starting with vicious, it may directly oppose virtuous in implying moral depravity, or it may connote malignancy, cruelty, or destructive violence, like a vicious gangster wanted for murder, antonym. Virtuous.
Moral depravity, cruelty. Sounds intense.
It is. This word often describes an inherent badness or an active intent to cause harm, whether moral or physical. It speaks to a fundamental malevolence, a deep-seated desire to inflict pain or destruction, or a character marked by aggressive harmfulness. A vicious rumor aims to actively harm someone's reputation, not just spread misinformation.
Right.
A vicious attack isn't just violent, it's marked by cruelty and malice.
So vicious is about that core destructive evil, often with an active intent to harm. Then there's villainous.
Villainous applies to any evil, depraved, or vile conduct or characteristic. Example, villainous behavior that must be punished.
Okay, broad, like a cartoon villain.
It can feel that way, yeah. It's like a broad term, covering actions that fit the archetype of a villain morally reprehensible and deserving of condemnation. It encapsulates all the characteristics we associate with a truly evil character, encompassing wickedness, depravity, and baseness. A villainous act is one that is overtly wicked, perhaps betraying trust or committing egregious harm, aligning with the negative traits we ascribe to antagonists in stories. It's behavior that is plainly fundamentally bad.
And iniquitous. The dictionary notes it implies absence of all signs of justice or fairness, like an iniquitous tyrant ruling by fear and intimidation. Antonym, righteous. This sounds like it points to systemic wrongdoing.
Indeed. The focus here is on profound injustice, An iniquitous act, system, or person is fundamentally unfair and morally wrong, often involving an abuse of power or a clear violation of what is right and equitable. An iniquitous law would be one that systematically disadvantages a particular group, lacking any semblance of fairness or equality. A society founded on iniquitous principles will be one where justice is denied to many and power is used to oppress. It's about a deep-seated lack of righteousness and an active commitment to unfairness.
That's a heavy one, speaking to deep injustice. How about nefarious?
Nefarious suggests flagrant breaching of time-honored laws and traditions of conduct. Examples include pornography, prostitution, and organized crime's other nefarious activities. Antonym, exemplary.
Flagrant breaching of laws and traditions sounds deliberately wicked.
It does. This word conveys a sense of deep-seated wickedness that defies established societal norms and moral codes, often associated with serious crime or profound evil that is deliberately and overtly wrong. It's a deliberate disregard for what's right and accepted by society, often carried out in secret or through illicit means. A nefarious plot isn't just bad, it's actively wicked and designed to subvert morality and legality. It often implies a level of cunning and deliberate evil.
And when such acts become widely known, we get infamous. The dictionary states it suggests shameful and scandalous wickedness, like infamous for their crimes. Antonym, illustrious.
The emphasis here is really on reputation. An infamous person or act is widely known for its profound badness, carrying a stigma of shame and scandal.
Ah, known for being bad.
Exactly. Their notoriety is specifically tied to their terrible deeds. Someone might be infamous for leading a corrupt regime, or a historical event might be infamous for its cruelty. Unlike famous, which just implies renown, infamous specifically means renowned for something universally condemned and disgraceful. It highlights the public disgrace associated with profound wickedness.
So notoriety for something terrible, a public mark of shame, and corrupt?
Corrupt stresses a loss of moral integrity or probity, causing betrayal of principle or sworn obligations. Example: City Hall was filled with corrupt politicians.
Loss of integrity, betrayal. Sounds like a fall from grace.
That's a good way to put it. It implies a fall from grace, a compromise of integrity, particularly in positions of trust or power. It's about a deviation from a higher standard, a breaking of sacred duties or principles. A corrupt official might accept bribes, betraying their oath of public service for personal gain. A corrupt system is one where fairness and justice have been eroded by dishonesty and moral decay. It emphasizes the internal decay that leads to betrayal.
A descent, then, from an expected standard of integrity. And finally, degenerate.
Degenerate suggests having sunk from a higher to an especially vicious or enervated condition, like a degenerate regime propped up by foreign support. Antonym, regenerate.
Sunk from a higher condition.
Yes, this describes a decline into a worse, more depraved state, suggesting a loss of vitality or moral fiber from a previously better, more wholesome condition. A society that degenerates might see a collapse of its values, a rise in crime, and a general moral decay. It speaks to a deterioration of character or standards, often implying a lack of energy or will to maintain a higher state. So from a fundamental evil to a public disgrace, these words allow for great precision in describing the many faces of wrongdoing. But not all wrongs are created equal, are they?
Right, exactly. Some are far more forgivable, and then there are faults that are less severe, perhaps even pardonable. What are the distinctions here, and why does that nuance matter?
The dictionary highlights venial and pardonable. Venial usually implies an opposition to grave, serious, or grievous, or in theological use, to mortal, and consequently it applies to what is trivial, harmless, or unwitting.
Trivial, harmless, unwitting.
Exactly. Examples: venial acts as opposed to truly criminal ones, or mistakes that were venial and easily overlooked. Antonyms: heinous, mortal. This describes minor offenses, faults that are easily overlooked or of little consequence, often unintentional. A small oversight in a report, a slightly tardy arrival, or a minor social faux pas could be considered a venial mistake, not serious enough to warrant significant punishment or deep condemnation.
Okay.
It suggests a low level of culpability or harm, distinguishing it from truly harmful or criminal acts.
So something easily dismissed because it's not severe, almost negligible in its impact. What about pardonable?
Pardonable implies that there is excuse of justification that makes the fault or error unworthy of consideration. Example: spoke with pardonable pride of her daughter's success. Antonym: unpardonable.
Excuse or justification. That's key.
It is. This goes a step further than venial, suggesting that an excuse or mitigating circumstance exists, making the fault understandable or truly forgivable. It implies a reason for setting the error aside, something that makes it truly not worth holding against someone. For instance, if a child tells a small fib to protect a friend, that might be seen as pardonable due to their good intentions.
Right.
Or, as the example shows, pride in a child's success, while technically a form of pride, is a universally understood and acceptable human emotion, making it pardonable. It's about justification, not just triviality.
What's fascinating here is that the distinction between venial and pardonable isn't just about the size of the wrong, but also about the presence of a legitimate reason for it. Understanding these words helps us to be far more precise when evaluating actions and their consequences, from minor missteps to major moral failings. It reminds us that not all wrongs carry the same weight or intent, and that context truly matters in how we assign blame or offer forgiveness. This gives you a more nuanced framework for navigating ethical dilemmas in your own life.
Conflict is a universal experience, isn't it? Whether it's a personal disagreement or a global struggle.
Yeah, unavoidable sometimes.
The dictionary offers a powerful lens through which to understand the roles people play, the outcomes of struggles, and even the motivations for retribution. Let's examine victim, prey, and quarry. While all describe someone who is targeted or subjected to harm, the nuance is profound, revealing different power dynamics and intentions. Let's start with victim. The dictionary notes, victim basically applies to a living being killed as a sacrifice to a divinity.
Oh, interesting origin.
But in more general use, it applies to one killed, injured, ruined, or badly treated either by a ruthless person or by an impersonal power that admits of no effective resistance, like victims of wars and disasters.
Powerlessness seems key here.
It is. This highlights vulnerability and often a profound lack of agency against overwhelming forces, whether human, like a ruthless aggressor, or impersonal, like a natural disaster or an economic downturn. It focuses on the suffering inflicted upon someone who is largely helpless or unable to resist. Think of the victims of a sudden earthquake or the victims of a malicious scam artist in both cases. There's a sense of being subjected to harm without effective means of defense. It emphasizes the suffering and the inability to fight back effectively.
So victim has that sense of powerlessness against a greater, often overwhelming force. How does prey differ? That sounds more active, more predatory.
It is. Prey basically applies to animals hunted and killed for food by other animals, and is often extended to a victim of something suggestive of a rapacious predator, like consumers who are easy prey for advertisers.
Easy prey. Yeah.
This implies a distinct predatory relationship, where one party actively seeks to exploit, consume, or gain advantage over another, often with a clear intention of profiting from their vulnerability. There's a distinct power imbalance and a sense of being targeted specifically for exploitation, much like a hunter targets an animal for sustenance. For instance, vulnerable elderly individuals can become prey for financial scams because of their trust or lack of technical knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase easy prey vividly describes someone who is easily exploited due to certain weaknesses. This word always implies an active, often cunning, exploitative pursuit.
That really changes the dynamic from passive suffering to active targeting for exploitation. And quarry, that sounds like hunting too.
It does, but with a focus on the chase. Quarry basically applies to a victim of the chase, and in more general use may apply to one pursued intensely as well as to one actually taken by the hunter or pursuer. Example, the private investigator was closing in on his quarry.
Ah, the pursuit itself.
Exactly. The emphasis here is on the pursuit. The quarry is actively sought, tracked, and targeted by a hunter or pursuer, suggesting an intense, focused effort to capture, obtain, or apprehend something or someone. Unlike a general victim of circumstance or prey being exploited, the quarry is the specific object of a focused chase. A detective's quarry is the suspect they are meticulously tracking, or a journalist's quarry might be the elusive truth they are relentlessly investigating. It implies an active hunt and a singular specific objective.
These distinctions help us understand the very different dynamics of being targeted, whether by random circumstance, exploitative intent, or direct focused pursuit. But what about when the target is overcome, when a struggle is concluded? How do we categorize different types of success? Because there's more to it than simply winning, right?
Absolutely. The words victory, conquest, and triumph give us a deeper understanding of what it means to overcome, each implying a different scale of achievement, effort, and recognition. Let's start with victory. The dictionary states, victory stresses the fact of winning against an opponent or against odds, like won an upset victory in the election. Antonym, defeat.
Okay, straightforward winning.
Pretty much. This is the straightforward fact of being the winner in a contest or challenge. It's about overcoming an opposing force or circumstance, simply achieving the win, often against specific odds. A sports team achieves a victory over their rival, or a political candidate wins an election. It can be hard won or easily gained, but the core meaning remains the successful outcome of a contest. It's about the direct result of prevailing.
So victory is just the win, the successful outcome. But conquest feels much grander and more absolute, more dominant.
It does, yes. Conquest stresses the subjugation or mastery of a defeated opponent, be it a personal antagonist or a difficult undertaking, like the conquest of space.
Subjugation or mastery.
Yes, this implies a more complete and often forceful subjugation or mastery. It's not just winning a single battle, but bringing something completely and thoroughly under one's control, whether it's an adversary, a territory, or a particularly difficult task or challenge. The conquest of Everest isn't just a victory over the mountain, it's a complete mastery of its formidable challenges.
Right.
Historically, a nation's conquest of another implies complete military and political subjugation. It implies dominance and full control, often achieved through significant effort.
That's a deeper level of overcoming complete mastery. And then triumph. This seems to carry more emotional weight, maybe celebration.
Absolutely. Triumph suggests a brilliant or decisive victory or an overwhelming conquest, and usually connotes the acclaim and personal satisfaction accruing to the winner. Example: crossed the finish line, her arms aloft in triumph. Antonym: defeat.
Acclaim and personal satisfaction.
Yes. A triumph is a truly significant and often celebrated victory, one that elicits great joy, pride, and public recognition. It carries an emotional weight, a sense of overwhelming success, and often involves widespread public recognition and deep personal satisfaction. An underdog team winning a championship against all odds isn't just a victory, it's a triumph, celebrated widely for its extraordinary nature.
Yeah.
It's the culmination of effort, skill, and often emotional investment, resulting in a momentous and celebrated achievement.
So from simply winning a contest to achieving complete mastery and subjugation to a celebrated, overwhelming success that brings public acclaim, each word tells a different story of overcoming. And sometimes these intense struggles or even deep personal slights can lead to powerful desires for retribution. What about the complex emotions around getting even?
Ah, yes, we have vindictive, revengeful, and vengeful. The subtle differences here lie mostly in the nature of the motivation, whether it's an inherent character trait or a reaction to a specific provocation. Let's delve into vindictive. The dictionary states, vindictive tends to stress the reaction as inherent in the nature of the individual and is appropriate when no specific motivating grievance exists.
No specific grievance.
So, like, not a vindictive bone in his body, but sometimes it implies a persistent emotion based on real or fancied wrongs that may manifest itself in implacable malevolence or in mere spiteful malice, like a vindictive person plotting revenge.
So it's like part of their personality.
Often, yes. This describes a deep-seated personality trait, an inclination towards revenge, or a tendency to be spiteful. It can be a constant, even unprovoked desire to harm or to nurse grudges, almost a part of one's character. A vindictive boss might penalize an employee not for a specific mistake, but because they simply dislike them. It suggests a cruel or vengeful disposition, regardless of immediate provocation.
So vindictive is an intrinsic quality, a part of who someone is. It suggests a more ingrained, perhaps even irrational, desire for harm or payback. How does that compare to revengeful and vengeful? They sound similar.
They are very close, and that's the key distinction from vindictive. Revengeful and vengeful are more likely to suggest the state of one specifically provoked to action and truculently ready to seek vengeance or act as an agent of it.
Yeah. Provoked to action. That's the difference.
Exactly. An insult that provoked a revengeful spirit in its target, or trained his children to be his vengeful agents. These words describe a state or an action motivated by a specific direct grievance. Someone becomes revengeful or vengeful because they were wronged, insulted, or harmed in a particular instance. Their desire for retribution is a direct, often fierce response to that event, and they are actively seeking to inflict payback.
Okay.
A character in a novel might turn vengeful after a betrayal, committing specific acts to right that perceived wrong. It's a situational response, a powerful desire for specific retribution, rather than an inherent disposition.
Understanding these words helps you dissect motivations and conflicts. Is someone naturally vindictive, prone to grudges and spite, regardless of the situation? Or are they acting revengeful or revengeful due to a specific event or deep wrong that has provoked them? This distinction raises an important question about personality versus a situational response, offering a much more nuanced understanding of why someone might seek to get even and the nature of that desire.
Moving on from conflict, let's talk about describing energy, ability, and activation. How we talk about the quality of action and how things become active or effective.
Right. Words for vitality, force, and bringing things to life. These words paint a picture of how things move, grow, and are set in motion.
We'll look at vigorous, energetic, strenuous, lusty, and nervous, but nervous in a very specific context. These aren't just synonyms for active, but describe distinct qualities of force, drive, and resilience, from physical robustness to mental acuity. Let's start with vigorous. The dictionary states, vigorous further implies showing undepleted or undiminished capacity for activity or freshness or robustness, like someone still vigorous and sharp in her 70th year. Antonyms, languorous, lethargic.
Undepleted or undiminished capacity sounds resilient.
It does. This speaks to sustained strength, resilience, and undiminished power over time. It's about being robust, full of enduring life, and maintaining a strong, healthy force even when others might flag. A vigorous debate is not just lively, but robust, with sustained, forceful arguments from all sides. A plant that grows vigorously shows strong, healthy, undiminished growth. It's about enduring strength and vitality, hinting at both physical and mental fortitude.
So vigorous is about that sustained, robust life force, that undiminished capacity. What about energetic? This feels more like a burst of activity, maybe?
You're right, it's a different quality. Energetic suggests a capacity for intense, sometimes bustling or forced activity, like an energetic wife, mother, and career woman. Antonym, lethargic.
Bustling or force.
Yes, this highlights the ability to engage in intense activity, often with a sense of busyness, dynamism, or even a driven, sometimes forced pace. It's about a high level of output, the raw capacity to do a lot, quickly or intensely. An energetic leader motivates a team with their boundless enthusiasm and rapid pace, inspiring action.
Right.
An energetic piece of music has a strong, lively beat that compels movement. It's about a compelling, sometimes bustling output of activity.
That makes sense. Energetic feels more about the amount or intensity of activity, powerful output. What about strenuous? That sounds like hard work.
It does. Strenuous suggests what is arduous or challenging and evokes a consistently vigorous response, like moving to Alaska in search of the strenuous life.
Arduous or challenging?
Yes, this implies that the activity itself is demanding, difficult, and requires a continuous, strong effort. It characterizes the difficulty of the task and the robust response it demands from the individual, highlighting the challenge involved. A strenuous hike demands sustained physical effort and endurance. A strenuous negotiation requires continuous, intense mental focus and resilience. It shifts the focus from the inherent quality of the person to the demanding nature of the task and the strong effort required to meet it.
So strenuous describes the nature of the task more than the person's inherent state. And then lusty. That's a wonderfully evocative word. Sounds hearty.
It is. Lusty implies exuberant energy and capacity for enjoyment. It's like a huge meal to satisfy their lusty appetites. Antonym is sweet.
Exuberant energy,
Yeah.
capacity for enjoyment.
Yes, this describes a hearty, robust energy, often associated with a vigorous appetite for life, pleasure, or sensation.
Yeah.
It's about a joyful and strong vitality, a zest for experience that often comes with a robust constitution. A lusty cheer is full of hearty, unrestrained enthusiasm. A character with a lusty laugh radiates robust enjoyment. It conjures an image of someone vibrant, full of life, and embracing experiences with gusto.
That's a word that really paints a picture. And finally, nervous, which you mentioned earlier, is in a specific context. I'm curious what that means here, definitely not in the anxious sense.
Yes, it's an older, more nuanced usage. In this context, nervous suggests especially the forcibleness and sustained effectiveness resulting from mental vigor. Like, a nervous energy informs his sculptures.
Mental vigor. Okay.
This is not about anxiety or apprehension, but about an intense, often sustained mental or intellectual drive that fuels creativity, a particular style, or precise, forceful execution. A writer might have a nervous prose style, meaning it is sharp, incisive, and intellectually taut.
Oh, okay.
A musician's performance might show nervous energy, indicating a high level of precise, intense, and focused mental control. It's a sharp, focused mental energy that provides consistent effectiveness and also leads to a distinct, almost taut quality in their work.
So whether it's raw physical power, the capacity for intense output, the demanding nature of a task, a joyous zest for life, or sharp mental acuity, these words give us a precise vocabulary for vigor and vitality. But how do we instill that energy, that life? What are the ways we talk about sparking activity or infusing something with purpose?
Here, we distinguish between vitalize, energize, and activate. While all imply bringing something to a state of activity, the East suggests a different method or degree of instilling life and purpose. Let's look at vitalize. The dictionary states, vitalize may stress the arousal of something more or less inert or lifeless, often by communicating an impetus or force.
Inert or lifeless.
Like taking steps to vitalize the local economy or in imparting a significance or interest to something, like a set of images that vitalize the story. Antonym, atrophy.
Breathing life into something.
Exactly. This implies breathing life into something that was sluggish, inert, dull, or even dying. It can be about imparting physical force, giving it a new impetus, or infusing something with meaning and interest, making it lively and significant. A new leader might vitalize a stagnant team by introducing fresh ideas and renewed purpose.
Right.
A compelling narrative can vitalize a dry historical account, making it engaging and relevant. It's about regeneration, giving new life and relevance.
So vitalize is like bringing something fundamentally to life, giving it new meaning or impetus, often from a state of decline. And energize, this sounds like a more direct power boost, like plugging something in.
It is. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Energize implies a arousing to activity or a readying for activity by an imparting of strength or providing with a source of energy, like a speech that energized the sales force for what lay ahead.
Imparting strength.
Yeah.
Okay.
This focuses on supplying power or strength, preparing something for vigorous action. It's about providing the necessary fuel or stimulus to get something going or keep it going with force, making it more dynamic and capable. A motivational speaker aims to energize their audience, filling them with the drive to act. A battery energizes a device, providing the power it needs to function. It's about imparting a palpable increase in strength, readiness, or dynamism.
That feels like a direct power boost, a charge.
Yeah.
And activate. This seems more about just initiating a function, turning it on.
Precisely. Activation stresses the influence of an external agent in arousing to activity.
Right.
Like a switch in the office activates all the outdoor lights. Antonym, arrest.
External agent. The switch.
Exactly. This emphasizes the external trigger or mechanism that sets something in motion. It's about initiation, making something functional or operative through a direct, often mechanical, procedural, or command-based action. Flipping a switch activates light. Entering a password activates a software program.
Got it.
It's about initiating a process, making something that was dormant or off, now functional and on, through an outside force. It's less about infusing life and more about making something operative.
So how do leaders energize their teams versus vitalize a stagnant company culture? And what activates a security system? These distinctions help us understand the different ways things are set in motion and kept effective, from a deep infusion of life and meaning to a simple flick of a switch, illustrating the varied approaches to bringing about action and efficacy.
Now, communication, it's really at the heart of everything we do, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Whether we're speaking, writing, or simply making noise, the nuances in how we describe expressing ourselves are incredibly rich and powerful. Let's first distinguish between vocal, articulate, and oral in terms of how something is expressed. These words define the medium, clarity, and form of communication. Let's begin with vocal. The dictionary states, vocal implies the use of the voice, but not necessarily of speech or language. Example, preferred vocal to instrumental music.
Just using the voice. Got it.
Right. This simply refers to the use of the human voice to produce sound, whether it's singing, a cry, a groan, or speech. It's about sound emanating from the vocal cords, a very basic function of the voice. A baby's cries are vocal expressions of distress. A singer's performance is a vocal presentation. It covers any sound produced by the voice, irrespective of whether it carries linguistic meaning.
So vocal is just about using the voice, even if it's not forming words. Then articulate. This feels like it's about clarity, like being understood.
It is indeed about clarity. Articulate implies the use of distinct, intelligible language, like someone so enraged that he was scarcely capable of articulate speech. Antonym, inarticulate.
Intelligible language. Makes sense.
This refers specifically to the clarity, precision, and comprehensibility of spoken language. When you're articulate, your words are clear, well-formed, and understandable, conveying meaning effectively and without ambiguity. Someone giving a clear, structured explanation of a complex topic is being articulate. It's about the ability to express thoughts in a coherent and easily understood manner, making your ideas accessible.
That's about clarity of speech, being understood, and oral. That sounds like speaking versus writing.
Exactly. Oral implies the use of the voice rather than the hand, as in writing or signaling in communication. Like, legend is the oral transmission of tradition, antonym, written,
Okay.
spoken.
This distinguishes spoken communication from written or other forms of communication, such as gestures or sign language. It specifies that the medium of transmission is through speech. And oral history relies on spoken accounts rather than written records. An oral examination tests a student's knowledge through verbal questions and answers. It emphasizes the verbal, spoken nature of the exchange.
So we've covered how sound is produced, how it's transmitted, and how clearly it conveys meaning. But what about the quality and impact of that spoken word? This is where personality and influence really come into play. How can you describe someone's way of speaking with precision, revealing their character or the effectiveness of their communication? Great question. Now we have vocal, articulate, fluent, eloquent, voluble, and glib. And it's important to note that vocal and articulate have a second, distinct meaning here,
Well,
shifting from the mechanics of speech to its character and impact. Let's revisit vocal, second meaning. The dictionary states, vocal usually implies ready responsiveness to an occasion for expression or free and usually forceful, insistent, or emphatic voicing of one's ideas or feelings, like one of the president's most vocal critics.
forceful, insistent, speaks up a lot.
Exactly. This describes someone who speaks up frequently, forcefully, and perhaps insistently. They are not shy about expressing their opinions, often with conviction and a strong presence. A vocal advocate for a cause isn't merely speaking, they are asserting their views repeatedly and with emphasis. This sense of vocal emphasizes readiness to speak and the forcefulness of expression, often reflecting a strong opinion or personality.
So this vocal is about how much someone speaks up and with what force and conviction. An articulate, second meaning. This also takes on a new layer of meaning beyond mere comprehensibility. How so?
Well, articulate, second meaning, implies the use of language which exactly and distinctly reveals or conveys what it seeks to express. Example, questioning criticism from those who are themselves hardly articulate. Antonym, inarticulate.
Exactly, and distinctly reveals precision.
That's it. This is about the precision and effectiveness of expression. An articulate person conveys their ideas not just clearly, but precisely, choosing words that perfectly fit their meaning and communicate it without ambiguity. A well-crafted legal brief or a precise scientific explanation is articulate because it perfectly communicates complex ideas in an exact way. It implies a mastery of language to perfectly match intent with expression.
That's about precision and clarity of thought, not just sound. What about fluent? That implies ease, right?
It does. Fluent stresses facility in speaking or writing and copiousness in the flow of words. It can also apply to using a foreign language, like having a fluent command of idiomatic French.
Facility and flow.
Yes. This highlights ease, smoothness, and often an abundance in the use of words. It implies an effortless, unhesitating flow of ideas and words, whether one's native language or a foreign one. A fluent conversationalist can seamlessly transition between topics, always having the right words at hand. It's about a graceful, uninhibited command over language.
So fluent is about ease and flow, but eloquent adds another layer, doesn't it? This one feels very powerful, moving even.
Absolutely. Eloquent usually implies fluency, but it suggests also the stimulus of powerful emotion and its expression in fervent and moving language, like being moved by the eloquent words of the Gettysburg Address.
Powerful emotion, moving language.
Yes, an eloquent speaker combines fluency with deep emotion and a powerful ability to move or inspire an audience. It's about persuasive and emotionally resonant language that truly impacts the listener, often evoking a strong response. A eulogy that brings tears to the eyes and captures the essence of a person's life is eloquent. It's about language that is not just skillful, but also deeply emotive and compelling, designed to stir the soul.
And then we have two words that are usually derogatory, voluble and glib. Let's start with voluble. What's the negative spin here?
Voluble is usually somewhat derogatory and suggests a flow of language that is not easily stemmed, like indulging in voluble explanations. Antonyms, stuttering, stammering.
Not easily stemmed, talks too much.
Essentially, this word has a negative connotation, implying an excessive, unending flow of words, often to the point of being tedious, verbose, or difficult to interrupt. Someone giving a voluble explanation might talk at length, rambling on without getting to the point, leaving their audience overwhelmed or bored.
Hmm.
It's talking too much without necessarily being effective or concise, and often implies an inability to stop speaking.
So voluble is talking too much without endpoint. And glib, that also has a negative ring. Sounds slippery.
It does. Glib is also usually derogatory and implies superficiality or emptiness in what is said, or slipperiness or untrustworthiness in the speaker. Examples: a blib reply, known for his glib tongue.
Superficiality, emptiness, untrustworthiness.
Wow. Yeah, it's strongly negative, suggesting a facile, insincere, or shallow manner of speaking, often used to avoid responsibility, to offer easy answers to complex questions, or maybe even to deceive. It lacks substance or trustworthiness, indicating a speaker who is perhaps too smooth, unprincipled, or simply superficial in their understanding. A politician giving a glib answer might provide a quick, easy response that avoids the real issue. It implies a lack of genuine thought or sincerity, often masking deeper issues.
This is fascinating. When you listen to public figures, engage in debates, or even just have conversations, these words help you discern not just what is being said, but how it's being said, and whether it carries genuine substance, intent, or even trustworthiness. That's a huge takeaway for navigating our information-rich world, helping you become a more discerning listener and speaker. But sometimes it's not just about the words, but the sheer force and quality of their delivery, the volume, the tone.
Exactly. Here we distinguish between vociferous, clamorous, blatant, strident, boisterous, and obstreperous. All imply loudness, but with crucial differences in their character, intention, and impact, reflecting various forms of noisy behavior. Let's begin with vociferous. The dictionary says, vociferous implies a vehement, deafening shouting or calling, urgent presentation of requests, excuses, or demands, like making vociferous demands.
Vehement, deafening, sounds really intense.
It is. This describes loud, forceful, and often insistent shouting, typically for a specific, often urgent purpose like making demands, expressing strong opinions, or protesting something. A crowd making vociferous demands is not just loud, they are emphatically and urgently trying to be heard. It implies a compelling, almost deafening quality to the sound, driven by conviction.
So, vociferous is intensely loud, often with a clear, urgent purpose. What about clamorous? How is that different?
Clamorous may imply insistency, as well as vociferousness in demanding or protesting, like clamorous demands for prison reforms, antonym taciturn.
Insistency again, but maybe more chaotic.
It can be. This suggests a loud, often confused or public outcry, marked by insistent demands or complaints, often from a group. It often implies a collective noise, a loud and persistent call from a crowd, which may or may not be entirely coherent but is certainly insistent. The clamorous cries of a hungry baby or the clamorous buzz of a market both indicate a loud, insistent, and often collective sound. It evokes a sense of noisy urgency from multiple sources.
That's a good picture of a noisy, demanding crowd. And blatant. This feels like it has a more negative, even offensive connotation, like something obvious and bad.
It absolutely does. Blatant implies an offensive bellowing or insensitive, conspicuous, or vulgar loudness. Example: a blatant and abusive drunkard. Antonyms: decorous, reserved.
Offensive, insensitive, vulgar. Definitely negative.
Highly negative, suggesting a loud, offensively obvious, or unashamed manner that is crude, vulgar, or unrefined. It's conspicuously unpleasant, something done in an open, unashamed way, often for shock value or out of sheer disrespect. A blatant lie is not just untrue, but shockingly obvious and offensively unsubtle. It describes an in-your-face, disagreeable noisiness or obviousness.
That definitely brings a specific, unpleasant image to mind. How about strident? That sounds harsh.
It is. Strident suggests a harsh and discordant noise, like hearing the strident cry of a crow.
Harsh and discordant. Grating.
Exactly. This describes a sharp, grating, or unpleasant sound, often high-pitched and piercing. It evokes a quality that is jarring and unpleasant to the ear, whether from a voice, an instrument, or a natural sound. A speaker with a strident voice might sound harsh or unpleasantly insistent. It's a sound that cuts through, but not in a pleasant way.
And then boisterous. This feels more about lively, perhaps even chaotic, fun, like a party.
Yes, that's right. Boisterous suggests a noisiness and turbulence due to high spirits and release from restraint, like a boisterous crowd of partygoers.
High spirits, release from restraint, lively.
Yes, this implies a lively, energetic, and often noisy quality, often associated with enthusiasm, exuberance, or a lack of inhibition, but generally in a positive, high-spirited way. A boisterous laugh is full of hearty, unrestrained joy. A boisterous game might involve a lot of shouting and energetic movement. It describes a lively, unrestrained, often joyful noisiness.
So boisterous is about lively, unrestrained, often positive noise. Finally, obstreperous. That sounds like trouble.
It often implies trouble, yes.
Yes.
Obstreperous suggests unruly and aggressive noisiness and resistance to restraint or authority, like the obstreperous demonstrators were removed from the hall.
Unruly, aggressive, resistant, defiant.
Precisely. This describes a defiant, unruly, and noisy behavior that actively resists control or authority. It implies a disruptive and aggressive noisiness, often used for those who are difficult to manage or who deliberately cause disturbance. An obstreperous child might loudly refuse to follow directions. It's not just loud, but actively resistant and disruptive.
What's fascinating here is how these words allow you to precisely convey the character of sound and the behavior associated with it, whether describing a determined protest, a lively party, a harsh criticism, or a defiant resistance. This level of detail in describing auditory experiences and their underlying motivations is incredibly powerful for understanding the world around you.
Moving on to intention. How do we describe actions based on choice and purpose? The distinctions here are really crucial.
Yeah, especially for things like accountability law.
Exactly. Understanding accountability, legal contexts, and personal motivations in any situation. These nuances define everything from culpability to genuine cooperation. Let's explore voluntary, intentional, deliberate, willful, and willing. Each word delineates a different level of conscious choice, planning, or predisposition behind an action. We begin with voluntary. The dictionary states, voluntary implies freedom and spontaneity of choice or action without external compulsion, like voluntary enlistment in the armed services. Antonyms, involuntary, instinctive.
Freedom, spontaneity, no compulsion, free will.
That's the essence. This stresses that an action is performed freely, without being forced, coerced, or driven by instinct. It highlights autonomy in the decision, emphasizing that the choice originated from within the individual. Participating in a voluntary cleanup effort means you chose to be there, uncoerced.
Right.
A voluntary confession is given without duress. It's about unforced self-initiation.
So voluntary is about free will, choosing something without external pressure. What about intentional? This feels like it adds a specific goal, a purpose.
It does. Intentional stresses an awareness of an end to be achieved, like the intentional concealment of vital information. Antonyms, unintentional, instinctive.
Awareness of an end. Aiming for something.
Exactly. This emphasizes that the action was done with a specific purpose or goal in mind. It speaks to foresight and design in the act, meaning you knew what you wanted to achieve and acted to bring it about. If someone intentionally leaves a door unlocked, they did so with the specific goal of it being unlocked. An intentional act is one where the outcome was a direct result of a conscious aim, distinguishing it from an accident or oversight.
So intentional adds the purpose, the conscious aim, and deliberate. This seems to imply more thought, perhaps even calculation, thinking it through.
Absolutely. Deliberate implies full consciousness of the nature of one's act and its consequences, like the deliberate sabotaging of a nuclear power plant. Antonym, impulsive.
Full consciousness of the act and consequences. Okay.
Yes. This takes intentional further by implying careful consideration, maybe a period of weighing options, and a full awareness of the potential outcomes and ramifications. It suggests thoughtful planning and calculation, rather than an impulsive or reactive act. A deliberate decision is one made after careful thought, not on a whim.
Right.
Deliberate arson implies careful planning, not a moment of recklessness. It's about calculated action with foresight.
That's a strong distinction. Deliberate means you really thought it through with foresight, and willful. This word often carries a negative connotation, doesn't it? Like stubbornness.
It often does. Willful adds to deliberate the implication of an obstinate determination to follow one's own will or choice, like willful ignorance.
Obstinate determination.
Yeah.
Stubborn.
This word often carries a negative connotation, suggesting a stubborn and determined adherence to one's own desires, sometimes in defiance of advice, consequences, or what is considered right. It's a headstrong persistence, a refusal to be swayed. Willful disobedience isn't just a failure to obey, it's a determined choice to go against authority. Willful damage implies a deliberate, obstinate decision to cause harm, often despite knowing it's wrong. It highlights a strong, often negative self-determination.
So willful is almost stubborn determination, a self-driven choice, often against better judgment. And finally, willing. This suggests a readiness, maybe even eagerness.
Yes. Willing implies a readiness and eagerness to accede to or anticipate the wishes of another, like a willing accomplice in a bank robbery. Antonym, unwilling.
Readiness and eagerness. Cooperative.
Yes, this describes a cooperative and agreeable attitude, a readiness to comply, assist, or even proactively anticipate the wishes of another. A willing participant is ready and eager to take part. A willing sacrifice is made freely and eagerly. It's about a positive disposition towards another's wishes or a course of action, reflecting an absence of reluctance or resistance.
Think about legal contexts, where the distinction between unintentional, intentional, and deliberate can mean the difference between various degrees of culpability, influencing sentences and public perception. Or in personal relationships, understanding if someone is willing to help out of genuine eagerness, or merely voluntarily doing something without true enthusiasm. These distinctions are vital for precise understanding of actions and the motivations behind them, giving you a clearer picture of human behavior.
Now let's turn our attention to what is often considered the darker side of human appetites, how we describe excessive desire and consumption.
Greed and related concepts.
Yeah. These words are incredibly vivid in capturing different facets of insatiable longing. We have voracious, gluttonous, ravenous, and rapacious. Each paints a vivid picture of insatiable desire, but with unique shades, from simple immense hunger to ruthless exploitative greed. First, voracious. The dictionary states, voracious applies especially to habitual gorging with what satisfies an appetite. Like teenagers are often voracious eaters.
Habitual gorging, consuming a lot.
Right. This describes an immense, often habitual hunger or appetite, usually for food, but also frequently used metaphorically for things like information or books. It suggests consuming great quantities, a boundless hunger that is difficult to satisfy. A voracious reader devours books quickly and in large numbers. A voracious appetite for knowledge drives constant learning. It primarily refers to a quantity of consumption driven by a large appetite, not necessarily with negative moral connotations.
So voracious is about consuming a lot, often habitually, and gluttonous. This sounds like it leans more into indulgence, maybe excess.
It does. Gluttonous applies to delight in eating or acquiring things, especially beyond the point of necessity or satiety, like an admiral notorious for his gluttonous appetite for wealth.
Delight in eating or acquiring, beyond necessity. That's key.
Yes. This refers to excessive indulgence, not just in food, but in acquiring anything beyond what is needed or reasonable, and, crucially, deriving great pleasure from this excess. It implies a selfish pleasure in overconsumption, a real delight in accumulating or devouring to an immoderate degree. A gluttonous collector keeps acquiring art even when their home is overflowing, simply for the sheer pleasure of ownership beyond any practical need. It speaks to a self-indulgent excess.
That's interesting. Gluttonous adds that element of delight in the excess and going beyond necessity. How does ravenous differ? That sounds fierce.
It does have a fiercer quality. Ravenous implies excessive hunger and suggests violent or grasping methods of dealing with whatever satisfies an appetite. Like football practice usually gives them ravenous appetites.
Violent or grasping methods. Wow.
This depicts an intense, almost desperate hunger, a fierce craving that might lead to aggressive, hurried, or even crude methods of consumption. It conveys a sense of urgent, almost fierce need, a hunger that drives one to grasp. After a long fast, one might feel ravenous, compelled to eat quickly and perhaps without much regard for manners.
Right.
It can also describe a desperate, intense desire for power or attention, driving someone to grasp at opportunities with force. It implies a fierce, almost predatory urgency in satisfying a strong appetite.
So ravenous has a more intense, almost desperate and aggressive quality in its pursuit. And finally, rapacious. This one feels the most ethically charged, the most negative.
It is indeed the most negative of the group. Rapacious often suggests excessive and utterly selfish acquisitiveness or avarice. Example, rapacious land developers indifferent to the ruination of the environment.
Utterly selfish acquisitiveness. Predatory.
Exactly. This implies ruthless, predatory greed, often involving exploitation, plunder, or extortion for personal gain, with little or no regard for others or the consequences. A rapacious corporation might ruthlessly exploit natural resources or laborers for maximum profit, disregarding ethical concerns or environmental damage. It speaks to a destructive, often unethical, pursuit of wealth or power through exploitation. It's not just taking a lot, it's taking ruthlessly and selfishly.
These words help us to precisely describe different forms of greed and consumption, from an innocent large appetite to self-indulgent excess to aggressive need and ultimately to destructive, exploitative behavior. Understanding these shades helps you better analyze human motivations and their impact on the world, from personal habits to large-scale ethical issues.
And even describing basic movements can be made richer and more evocative with the right word. These aren't just about how someone moves, but often the emotional or psychological state that accompanies that movement. Let's look at wallow, welter, and grovel. These words paint very specific, often vivid, pictures of movement in the state of being, capturing everything from indulgent self-pity to desperate submission. Let's start with wallow. The dictionary states, wallow basically implies a lurching or rolling to and fro, as of a hog in the mire or a ship in a troubled sea, and may imply complete self-abandonment.
Rolling to and fro, like in mud.
Like wallowing in self-pity or absorption, like someone who wallowed in the romantic music.
Indulging.
Yes. This word implies a heavy, often uncontrolled rolling movement, like an animal rolling in mud. But it powerfully extends to indulging oneself fully and often excessively in an emotion or experience, frequently with a negative connotation of self-pity or pleasure. Someone might wallow in their misery, indulging every negative feeling without trying to escape. Conversely, one might wallow in luxurious comfort, completely abandoning themselves to the pleasure. It implies a kind of heavy, unrestrained indulgence, often sinking into a state.
So wallow is about indulging, or being tossed about in a heavy, often uncontrolled way. What about welter? That sounds chaotic.
It often implies chaos. Welter is likely to carry a stronger implication of being helplessly at the mercy of outside forces. Example, a tide of refugees, many of whom weltered, adrift on the sea for days.
Helplessly at the mercy. Overwhelming.
Exactly. This describes a chaotic, disordered state, often involving being tossed about, rolled over, or submerged by powerful, overwhelming external forces. It highlights a profound lack of control and a strong sense of helplessness against overwhelming circumstances. A battleground might be a welter of bodies and debris. Someone struggling with an avalanche of information might describe themselves as weltering in data, hopelessly submerged and tossed about by it. It conveys a sense of chaotic helplessness in the face of a deluge.
That gives a strong sense of being out of control, overwhelmed by external forces, and grovel. This word carries a powerful emotional charge related to humility or maybe abasement.
It certainly does. Grovel implies a crawling or wriggling close to the ground in abject fear, self-abasement, or utter degradation, like someone who groveled for forgiveness.
Crawling, abject fear, degradation. Wow.
Yeah, it's a strong image. This suggests a posture of extreme humility, submission, or servility, often due to intense fear, a desperate desire for forgiveness, or utter self-degradation. It's a debasing physical action that communicates utter deference or shame, reducing oneself to the lowest possible position. A defeated enemy might grovel before their conqueror, begging for mercy.
Right.
Someone caught in a serious transgression might grovel before a loved one, trying to convey their deep regret and shame. It implies a desperate, undignified plea born of fear or shame.
These words provide incredible visual and emotional specificity. When someone is expressing deep regret, are they simply apologizing, or are they groveling in abject shame? The choice of word conjures a distinct image and implies a completely different emotional state and level of desperation or degradation. This highlights how a single word can encapsulate a complex set of actions, emotions, and power dynamics.
And finally, let's explore how the language describes the way we get paid. Seems simple, but it reveals different relationships to work, value, and the nature of employment.
Right. Compensation, wage, salary,
No.
what else? These distinctions are fundamental to how we structure work and reward effort.
We'll distinguish between wage, salary, stipend, pay, and fee. While all are forms of compensation, their applications are quite specific, reflecting different employment models, types of work, and payment structures. Let's begin with wage. The dictionary states, wage, often used in the plural wages, applies to an amount paid usually on an hourly basis and chiefly at weekly intervals, especially for physical labor, like dirty and difficult jobs should command a higher wage.
Hourly, weekly, physical labor, that's the classic idea of a wage.
Exactly. This term is typically associated with hourly work, often physical or manual labor, and regular frequent payments, most commonly weekly. It ties directly to hours worked or tasks completed on a short-term, often unit-based basis. A construction worker earns a wage per hour, or a factory worker earns a wage per piece produced. It implies compensation for direct labor output.
So, wage is for hourly, often physical or manual work, paid frequently. What about salary? This feels like it applies to more professional roles, maybe office jobs.
It often does. Salary applies to compensation at a fixed, often annual rate. that is paid in installments at regular intervals and suggests that the services performed require training or special ability, like negotiating for a higher salary.
Fixed rate, regular intervals, special ability.
Right. This refers to a fixed annual income, usually for professional, managerial, or skilled work, paid out in regular, less frequent installments like biweekly or monthly. It implies a level of expertise, training, or responsibility beyond manual labor, often for a more consistent ongoing role where hours might fluctuate but the compensation is stable. An engineer or a teacher typically earns a salary. It speaks to a more stable, often white-collar form of compensation, not directly tied to hourly output.
That makes sense for more professional, ongoing roles. And stipend, this one seems quite specific, maybe for students or interns.
Often, yes. Stipend adds to salary the notion of a regular income, such as a pension or scholarship paid without concurrently performed service. Example, received a fellowship that included a small stipend.
Without concurrently performed service. So more like support.
Exactly. This term usually refers to a fixed payment given for support, such as for studies, an internship, a period of retirement, or living expenses during a fellowship. Crucially, active, ongoing work is not necessarily required during the payment period itself. It's a payment for maintenance or support rather than direct labor or typical employment contract. A graduate student might receive a stipend to cover living costs while pursuing their research. It implies a supportive, often temporary financial allowance.
So stipend is more for support or learning, not direct active work. What about pay? This seems like the most general term, the one we use all the time.
It is. Pay can replace any of the foregoing and is one of these terms freely used in combination or as a modifier, like waiting for payday or lost his pay envelope.
Just the general term.
Right. This is the most general and versatile term for remuneration, applicable in almost any context where money is received for services rendered, goods delivered, or work performed. It's the overarching term and can be used informally to refer to wages, salary, or fees. It's the most common and colloquial way to refer to compensation in general.
And finally, fee. That sounds like payment for a specific service.
Precisely. Fee applies to the price asked, usually in the form of a fixed charge for a specific professional service, like a pianist's fee for a concert.
Fixed charge, specific service, like
Yeah.
a lawyer or consultant.
Exactly. This is a payment for a specific service, often professional, and is typically a one-time charge rather than ongoing employment. It's for a distinct engagement, consultation, or specific deliverable. A lawyer charges a fee for a consultation, an artist charges a fee for a commission, or a doctor charges a fee for an office visit. It implies a transactional payment for a particular expertise or service, distinct from ongoing employment.
Understanding these terms helps clarify different employment models, from hourly labor to salaried professions, temporary support, general compensation, and specialized services. It helps us understand the nuances of how value is exchanged for work and expertise in our economy. Wow, what a journey through the intricate world of words. From the subtle differences in employing a resource versus utilizing it, to the precise nature of evil and culpability, and even how we describe getting paid, the English language truly offers an incredible spectrum of expression.
It really does. This deep dive reveals that words are not just labels on a page. They are finely crafted tools, each with its own unique edges, weight, and purpose. Choosing the right word isn't just about sounding sophisticated. It's about clarity, accuracy, and truly conveying your meaning, or truly grasping the nuanced meaning conveyed by others. The path to being well-informed lies in recognizing and appreciating these linguistic details.
Our exploration of Webster's Dictionary of Synonyms and Antonyms has shown that the path to being well-informed often lies precisely in those details. The more precise our vocabulary, the more precise and nuanced our thoughts can become, allowing us to perceive and describe the world with greater clarity and depth.
As you go about your week, maybe consider this. How might a deeper appreciation for these subtle distinctions, like the difference between vain and otiose, or intentional and deliberate, how might that change the way you read a news article, listen to a debate, or even formulate your own arguments? Could a more precise choice of words, perhaps one you just learned today, have changed the outcome of a recent conversation, improved the impact of a document you wrote, or helped you understand a situation with greater clarity?
That's a great thought to leave with. Thank you for joining us on this linguistic deep dive. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep diving deep.